Hi, Kory. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, well, welcome back, I should say.
Yes.
That's
It's
right.
glad to always come back.
Yeah, we're excited to dig into vocabulary with you today.
Yes.
Yeah, and specifically, we want to talk about morphology with you because we know morphology, which is the study of word parts like prefixes, suffixes, and what all of those mean, the meanings behind them, is really important for upper elementary, which is where you teach. So can you tell us a little bit about, what does morphology instruction look like in your classroom? And can you even give us like some examples of what it looks like?
Yes, absolutely. So when I think about morphology, I definitely think about the upper part of the reading rope, like those like semantics, syntax, and those type of parts of the language comprehension. So when we do morphology, we actually give students 8 weekly words that go with the passage we're reading. So this week we're reading about which one is more efficient to use, droids for entertainment or fireworks. So then we have different weekly words that go with it. And then with those weekly words, we break it into all of its morphemes, like what is the prefix, what is the root word, what is the suffix, and what does this all mean together with going into a definition right there. So many students, I put up the word and then we go, what's the prefix? And then they go, the prefix is this part right there. So the prefix might be con, the prefix might be pre, the prefix might be ab, and things like that. And we do it so many times that they're starting to internalize what these words mean. Like, for example, I go, what does the prefix X mean? And they go, oh, it means out, like exit, and things like that. Then we go to the root word right there, and then they find what the definition of the root word is. And then sometimes it has a suffix, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it has 2 suffixes right there. So we go with the suffix and what does that mean? And we write down every single word part definition.
Got it. Kory, do you ever have them kind of play around with it, like taking like the root or the base and putting different prefixes and suffixes on?
Yes. So we have different cards in the classroom that are laminated, so they can always erase them right there. Green is for prefixes, yellow is for root words, and red is for suffixes. So for those who are watching, they look somewhat like this. So green
little rectangular cards,
little rectangular
laminated.
cards laminated that they can write on dry erase markers and erase really easily. So then I usually give them a root word that goes with it. So like, let's just say the root word is spect. So they all write spect on the yellow card. Then I give them some prefixes that might go with it. Con, and those type of prefixes. Then I might give them some suffixes, shun, and those type of suffixes right there. Then they each have a morphology mat, which is actually very similar to sound boxes and L. Conan boxes. So they just are rectangulars that fit right into a piece of paper. And then they just bring down each word and try to build it as we go. And the number one question I get asked the most is this a real word? Did I make a real word? And I'm like, well, I will go over all the answers at the end of all the real words. But they're like very much playing with it, being like, I think that's a real word. Let me try this. Is this a real word? And stuff like that. So
do you give them, like for spect, for an example, do you give them the definition of spect? Or I'm just curious, in upper elementary, like, do you let them try to figure it out? Like, how do they get to the meaning of spect?
They each have a morphology key for those who are watching, which is just a half sheet of paper, which has all their morphemes in it. Prefixes, Latin roots, suffixes, Greek forms, and then other ones. Others could include like nocturne, which means night, diurnn, which means day, vensin, which means near or neighboring, things like that. Venom, which means poison.
So what Kory's describing is a little half-sheet book. It has a little magnifying glass on it, and it says My Morphology Key. And then inside are all of these definitions that students can refer to, which I think would be super helpful for an activity like this, because then they can reference rather than guess, right? So they're referencing while they work.
Right. So they would find the spect, the meaning of spect in there, right? What is it to see? Is that something about seeing, right?
So yeah, it's let's find out.
Let's find out. Let's look it up.
Right in here. What spect means to look at, see, observe, or watch.
All right. So we're on point.
And it's all alphabetical right there.
Yeah.
So
that's
they
fun.
can do
and they
it
get to play around with it. That's really fun.
Right. And for those teachers who are like, well, I don't know all the morphemes. I do suggest the My Morpheme Dictionary that Lori has talked about before with the kids dictionary, which has all the morphemes in there that you can just pick and choose, make them in alphabetical order for prefixes, root words, suffixes, Greek combining forms, those type of words right there. Other type right there. Luckily,
Are
I
you
do have
talking
a
about the
curriculum.
Once Upon a Word book, Kory?
Yes, Once Upon a Word.
Okay, and
Yes.
we'll link that in the show notes too.
So you can make those. Luckily, I have a curriculum that does it for me. So that is very fortunate for myself, but I know very many educators do not. So you can just create your own morphology key with a packet. And we had a great discussion actually the other day. It was miss. They were looking for MISS. And they were like, miss is also actually a prefix as well, just MIS, but it's also a root word as well. So we had to have a conversation. Well, is it a prefix or is it a root word, the word miss? So
Like,
the
as in, like,
prefix,
so dismiss is like would be an example of when it would be a base or a
it would
root.
be a root word. Yep.
And
Right
then,
there,
like,
like this.
mispronunciation, like, obviously
Mhm.
with the one less S, would be the
Would be,
prefix.
which
Or
means
is
bad
there
or wrong.
MISS in a prefix?
Oh, no, it's just
No.
MIS in a
Okay, that's what I
prefix.
thought.
So then MISS would be the root word, which means to send.
Okay.
And a lot
See,
of
I
them
mean,
like
I
that.
feel like words are so much fun and very, like, I'm just curious about them.
Yeah. I was just thinking about missile. Is that
Oh,
the root
mistletoe.
same?
Is that
Missile,
a,
which means,
Not like
which miss
mistletoe,
means
like a
to
missile.
send. But miss like missile because miss does mean to send. So we actually had a good conversation. Like I
didn't know
found
that.
miss, but it only has one S. And one kid at the table said, then that's not it. We have to find one with two S's. And they kept looking. One kid's like, because you're looking at the prefixes, it's a root word. So then they had to switch to the root words
that's really fun.
in there as well. And it is organized on the side, being like, here are all the prefixes, here's all the Latin roots, here's all the suffixes, here's all the Greek combining forms. We haven't dug too deep into Greek combining forms. We're actually doing that after spring break. So end of March to the end of the year, we'll be doing more of Greek combining forms. And the good news is they do this again in 5th grade. So they get it with me in 4th grade and they do all again, just new words into 5th grade. And it's just like, I think when I started doing this, it was just so impressive how these students were able to hold on to the meaning of the words. We do it a lot with phonics and phoneme awareness. We teach, like, if we can teach them the sound, then we can unlock more words, or the syllable type. Well, we should have that same understanding with morphemes. If we teach them the morpheme, we unlock a lot more words for them to understand instead of just like, here's the word, know the word.
So, Kory, I feel like you've touched on this, but I'd like to hear from you just a little more explicitly. Why is focusing on morphology and the different word parts so powerful for students? What have you seen in your students speaking or reading or writing that's helped you kind of see the value in spending time on this?
Definitely with speaking, it's definitely unlocked more vocabulary words for them to speak and look at other vocabulary words in other content areas. I'm fortunate enough to teach all content areas to my students. So I teach reading, writing, math, science, social studies, all of the contents. I know some teachers just teach one content, but I can take this morphology knowledge and bring it to other contents that we do in science, that we do in math. Right now we're going through a geometry unit, and there's a lot of Greek combining forms in geometry. So then we could take that knowledge we built in that and go over to other content areas. The other thing that has been very surprising is helping them with their writing. Because when you know the morphemes, you can actually know the part of speech. Most of the time when a word ends with shun, it's gonna be a noun. That's what it is. And most of the time if it doesn't have a suffix, it's gonna be a verb. And if it has a suffix "ly," it's probably most likely going to be an adverb. And they can look at the word and be like, oh, that is a noun or that is a subject. I need to treat it like a noun or subject. I can't treat it like a verb.
I want to ask you more about writing in just a minute, but
Yes.
You made me think of, we had Lynn Stone on the podcast a little while ago, and she talked a lot about this of like, if you teach these word families or like the suffixes, like you're talking about the parts of the words, you unlock so much more for a student. Like why, like we don't want to just focus on, here's a list of 10 words, memorize them. You may or may not remember them after the test. But like this way is so much more powerful because we don't have time to teach every word that's out there. But this way they learn so much more that they can apply to so many more words.
Right. And I think the research shows like when you go more in upper grades, they need to know what, like around 500 to like 1,000 words every single year. It's like, we don't have time to teach 500 or 1,000 words a year. But we have time to teach a morpheme that can unlock more words as we go. And then when I do assessments or when I do informal assessments, I might pick morphemes that are related to what I've taught. It might not be the same word, but it'll be a morpheme that's related to it. And actually our data and vocabulary has gone up and up every single year since we started morphemes. I had students in the past who are now in 5th and 6th grade now getting in the 100th percentile on their state tests under vocabulary.
That's amazing.
So yeah.
So cool. And you know what I love about that is that you didn't teach them 1,000 words a year,
Correct.
right? You taught them actually like thousands more, because by teaching them the prefix un and by teaching them the, the base word spect, they can now unlock every word that, or at least have a general understanding, right? That then actually prompts them to do more word learning around that.
Mhm.
To be able to like go and be like, oh, okay, I get that this must mean to see or whatever. And then I'm going to look at the parts around it. Like you're actually teaching them how to dissect and understand words in a bigger context, which is, I mean, clearly showing off with 100%. That's so cool.
Right. So yeah, so after they actually build a word and write a word, then they write the definition, and then I always ask them what part of speech the word is, and then they write it into a sentence. We do that pretty much like twice a week, where they build words, and it only takes about 10 minutes. Here are your word parts, build a word, build your words, pick one word, use your morphology key, find the definition, what part of speech is this word, and then put it in, and then write your vocabulary word into a sentence. So like if we were to do inspect, spect means to watch, in means to look into, like in or into. So to look into something. If I inspect something, I'm looking into something. Inspect does not have a suffix, most likely going to be a verb because of the way the definition is. To look into has the word to in it, most likely going to be a verb. So then we write it into a sentence. Start with a subject. I am going to inspect blank right there. So then they can, or I will inspect, those type of words right there. Then we can talk about other parts of speech when I add ed, the past tense to it. If I add ing to the word, make it present progressive, and those type of suffixes right there as we go.
So you definitely have them writing, because I said I was going to bring it back to writing.
Yeah.
So you definitely have them writing sentences. Do they have to include these words in any other types of writing?
I definitely, at the end of the 5-day cycle, so we spend 5 days on morphemes, 5 days on a topic. So like I said, right now we're going into which one is better, a drone show or fireworks. And we talk about like the pros and cons of each one. So it's going to be opinion writing. And that's pretty much what the question is. Which one is a better form of entertainment, a drone show or fireworks? And they have to write a paragraph on that. And to the point right now when it comes to writing, I pretty much just say, I want you to add 2 of these weekly words that we worked on and broke into morphemes into your writing. You need to have a topic sentence. You need to have 2 to 3 detailed sentences. You need a conclusion statement. I might add other things like you need different types of sentences. Don't make them all declarative. Try that for a challenge. Try to add a compound subject, subordinating conjunction, add a conjunction, and I just write those as expectations on the board. And then I go and then I write 2, and then I want you to have 2 weekly words in your writing for writing your paragraph to answer this question. So it's also helping build their knowledge because, as we know, writing can be one of the best indicators to show your knowledge on a topic.
Yeah, and it's a good way for you as the teacher to kind of see their knowledge of the topic, but then also are they using these words correctly? So you get to kind of get a sense of their vocabulary knowledge as well.
And it's just like a quick paragraph writing, then they just turn it into me and I take quick notes on it and send it back to them. And we've done this for like almost every single week.
So powerful. I feel like you are using word learning to teach reading comprehension, to teach writing comprehension, to teach oral language comprehension. Is there anything, Kory, that you do to model this as a teacher? Like, I know that you talked about the student exploration and their use of their resources, but from a teaching perspective, do you do any explicit instruction around these words at any point during that, like, exploration before or after, or any other points in the day?
That's a great question. So they usually don't do the exploration until I say if it's a 5-day cycle on day 4. So usually day 2 and 3 is more explicit instruction where the word might already be broken for them. And they just write the definition under each part. So if we did inspection, I probably just broke it into in, spec, shun, and then they just find the word parts right there. And actually breaking into morphemes makes me think of one other thing that we always get into as a conversation in our classroom, that breaking morphemes is not the same as breaking into syllables. Like the way 2 different things. Contra has 2 syllables, but that's one morpheme, which means against or opposite right there. So breaking into morphemes is not the same as breaking it into syllables. Those are 2 different understandings for students. And that's kind of pretty much what I tell them. Like by the time you get up to upper grades, and not saying that you could teach morphemes in lower grades. Like that is possible to teach morphemes in lower grades. But by the time they get up to upper grades, I try to make the distinction like, I already know you know how to read this word. Now I want you to know what the word actually means. Like I have data that you can all read this word, but do you know what this word means? And can you use it in a sentence? Can you use it in spoken language? I know some teachers in my school actually put a weekly word on their shirt and a badge with a definition, and kids have to use that weekly word 2 to 3 times a day. Oh, I know some teachers do
I was
that.
just going to say, Lynn Stone, bringing her back again. She actually posted just today, kind of, because she's in Australia. So today. But she just posted about this very topic about syllables versus word parts and how, yes, when they're learning how to decode, like breaking it into syllables is very helpful. But also, I see these questions all the time of like, where do you break this word? And some people say this way, some people say that way. And it's like, well, okay. Now, if we're arguing about this, do we really need to like get kids to have this exactly correct? And she just said what you said, which is, the better question is to get to once they know how to decode it already, like you said, most of your students do already, then let's talk about what the parts mean, because that is so much more powerful to get them to know what the meaning of the words. So you and Lynn Stone on the same page.
We're right there. Wow. I'm glad I'm on the same page with Lynn Stone. That makes me feel a lot better.
That's a good be on, yeah.
I'm like, apparently what I'm doing in my classroom is appropriate, so that's great.
Kory, is there anything that as you were working with your students that really surprised you? Either I'm thinking within this like 5-day cycle of word teaching, word learning, or just generally over the course of the school year. It's almost, our listeners will be hearing this in March. So anything over the course of the school year that you've noticed your students have grown?
They definitely grown in their knowledge around the morphemes. Like when you explicitly teach them and you just keep going back to words that have morphemes and they have an explicit morphology key with them that they can reference all the time. My pre-assessment at the beginning of the year, I think I only had one student pass their morphology question, and we just did assessment yesterday and I had about 95%.
Whoa.
Pass. So like,
well, that's convenient that we didn't even script that question. I asked it. Wow. Oh my gosh. Congratulations. That's
and like
amazing.
I said, and the state test data just keeps going up and up with their vocabulary instruction right there. And I know that when they have a strong vocabulary, their comprehension gets more in depth. They're able to answer the questions in a more depth way with their writing, and they're just able to unlock a lot more of their understanding, and not just in reading, writing, and speaking, like in math and science. For example, we're working on shapes and geometry. So we're working on hexagons and quadrilaterals. So then we go, well, hex means 6, gon means shape, so a 6-sided shape. And actually in Greek morphology keys, it actually does work from left to right, 6-sided shape. Whereas Latin roots, it works the other way around. And I kind of got into a big nerd session there for a while, and I started digging into like the English language and all like the word parts. I was like, well, this is why we have Latin roots, and this is why we have Greek, and this is why we have French here, and this is why we have Anglo-Saxons. So then you can take it to other contexts and build their knowledge. Once they understand Greek combining forms, Latin roots, those type of things, it doesn't just have to stick in literacy. I would love to take it into the art class, into physical education, into music, all those different types of parts right there, where it's like you unlock so much for the student to just understand the world around them.
Yeah, and Kory, I just love how you're building, like you said, your own curiosity around words is, I'm sure that is rubbing off on your students. And that is so huge for students to have that mindset of just wanting to be able to, well, let me figure out this word. I want to know, like, not just because like, oh, it's cool to see kids excited, but that's going to help them learn words for the rest of their life. So it's huge.
And all those word parts. And I actually try to say with them, they're like, you don't know the definition of this word? I was like, no, I was not taught this way. I was not taught to break it into morphemes. So when I'm breaking into morphemes with you, I'm actually learning right alongside with you. Could I look up the answer in a book? I could, but I'd rather learn it with you. Like, well, knowing this word, I think this is what it means based off the morphemes right there. And going into those morphemes right there, what could be challenging is that a lot of morphemes have different meanings with them. Like shun does mean the quality, the action. So then you have to really dig deep. Well, which one is it? Is it the quality or is it the action?
Right. And then you're thinking about the comprehension of the sentence, of the part of the book that you're reading, or of the article that you're, the paragraph that you're trying to unpack. And I think that that's the powerful part is, and I totally get it. Like you learning alongside them when they're authentically asking a question, you're like, well, I think it means this. Like, what's more powerful than that? You've you have your time for your explicit instruction. You have your time, your planned opportunities, right, within your instruction. But when they authentically are asking you questions like that, modeling for them, like, I think it's this because I'm breaking it down this way, and like talking that out for them, just like you did for us, so powerful for kids to hear you model that and be like, oh, yeah, it's kind of a little off there, but I had the idea here with the prefix, but I didn't really quite I wasn't able to really articulate that root word or that base word as clearly as I could have. I mean, so powerful for them both to hear you unpacking it and also to hear you like both be wrong and also correct sometimes, right? Cool, I got that. That's awesome. So I love that you're that model for your students and really helping them get to that place too.
No, they like to write their own definition when they're just like, oh, I don't know, let me try. And then they talk about it at their table, like, this is what I wrote. What did you write? What did you write? And then they just talk about that kind of stuff. Like, this is what I think it means. Oh, I kind of wrote the same thing right there. And then I tell them, well, this is what I think it means. And then we actually show the definition. Some kids are like, oh, I was close. I was close to that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, you were pretty close to that one right there. So.
Kory, we cannot thank you enough. We love hearing about what you're doing in your classroom. So thank you so much for your time and for sharing with our audience. We really appreciate it.
Yes. Just one more quick thing. If you would like to see this in a visual, check out Melissa and Lori's book, The Literacy 50, on page 124. Has that model of my classroom right there ready for you. It's on page 124 in the Literacy 50, how students write on the cards, green, yellow, red, how they put it in the morpheme mat, how they write it into a word, write into a sentence, write the definition. All that is on page 124. So if you have the book, check that out for a visual reference.
Thank you. That's awesome. All right.
Yeah, thank you again so much, Kory. We really appreciate it.